This episode of UDSP is brought to you by Audible. For a free 30-day trial and to receive a free audio book, just head on over to audible.com/Gamebreaker. What's up, everybody? Welcome to UDSP episode 11. It's the Unicorn Duck Shadow Puppets. August 5th, 2013. You're watching Gamebreaker. I'm Gary Gannon. Coming up on today's show, we're going to talk about combat, cities, raids, and names. All that and more, but first, from Zam.com, editor-in-chief, Mr. Scott Hawks. Well, it'd be good if I put a camera on me. I just left the card up the entire time. Hi! Hi.
He's really there. It's okay. He's not lying. He's actually there.
I've been away for a couple days, and everything's just gone to crap.
I know how you feel. Yeah, I'm still blurry.
Brain's not firing yet.
No.
And joining us, as always, Mr. Farhan Siddiqui. How are you? Back after a week off?
Yep. I'm back. Happy to be back.
Happy to have you back. And joining us again for the second week in a row, Mr. Mark Taylor from Guild Umbra. How are you, sir?
I'm doing well, thanks.
Excellent, excellent, excellent. Let's talk about some WildStar. So, gonna do a little bit of a different show this week. There's some interesting...
A little bit.
There's some different posts and threads up over on Reddit. Figured we'd talk about something because they were really interesting. First up, our producer actually sends his apologies to all the people on Reddit. It just hadn't really occurred to him to kind of like give the shout out to you guys that are making the thread. So sorry, Reddit. Now I get to butcher everybody's like whacked out name on Reddit, so have fun with that. So don't start leaving comments about like, you know.
Only reason I prodded Dom about it because I thought these names just could be hilarious listening to Gary read them out.
Oh yeah, like this first one already. It's like, so you guys wanted your names in here? Sure, I'm gonna try, but don't leave me comments when I don't pronounce it correctly. Semtexiv. Sure.
Yeah, good job.
Is that a good one?
Okay.
Sounds about right.
Sure, that's your name on Reddit. Semtex. There you go. So they were she, I don't know, was concerned about the fluidity of combat in WildStar. I only got my only hands-on so far has been at E3. We talked a little bit about that, Mark, and I don't know. I've always kind of said like it's hard to really get a really good sense of stuff like that in a conference setting because you got the lights going, you got music going, you got like limited time, your brain's not like functioning properly, and you're not like hitting buttons like trying to like see if there's latency and stuff. What have you felt of what about like combat delay, things like that?
So I mean, to your point, that's totally true because I mean I'm used to playing with like a G13 and I got a G6 mouse, so I got like a billion buttons with all my macros set. So when you're standing in line, you've got like 10 folks behind you waiting to get there, and you've got a laptop or you got some setup that's not yours. But you know, the little bit that I've played it a couple of times at PAX East and E3. It is a slight difference, and what I mean is there is tab targeting, but you know, then they also have like the little telegraph system. So there, I don't want to lie to people. It is going to be a slight adjustment because when you tab target a person or you have an area fire, it's not going to be like your tune's just going to reach around and automatically just start shooting while you're busy navigating your tune. You kind of have to face the target that you're fighting, even though you might have tab targeted to the one that you want to fight or to a group. You kind of have to make sure that you're facing the whole time. So that was probably the biggest challenge. But you know, after like I played it religiously probably for 3 days straight, by the the second, I guess, cumulative hour, it was just like second nature. So I wouldn't want anybody to be alarmed. I wouldn't want anybody to be off-put by it. But I just think that people need to realize that it is not going to be text and verse like everything they've always expected.
I think if you've only ever played tab target MMOs your life, like if you've never played other games, like if you've never played a MOBA or like just action games, first-person shooters like that, you're going to struggle. But as soon as you play it, the little bit that I've played, it's actually quite responsive. and you don't have that much like ability latency going on already, so that's really encouraging. But yeah, if you do your tab and you sort of focus, it's in this kind of general direction. You've still got to fine tune. It'll give you a quick aid. It's did we talk about before the idea of having bumpers in a when you go bowling? It's like you're putting those up. But the difference is that when you hit it, you're in that direction, but it's not going to be as accurate as you need to be. Remember, that thing's still going to be moving. You need to follow where it's going. So tabbing's useful, but being more precise, making sure that you're aiming, making sure that you've got it lined up so you're getting all of the mobs that you want to hit lined up is important. But
have you guys noticed any sort of like latency
responsive
with actually ability responsive delays, like hitting a button and like things firing off? And I guess the other thing I'm worried about, it's felt pretty good to me, but again, it's like it's so hard to tell. You're talking about like milliseconds, and in a conference setting, it's kind of hard to really feel that. How about animation wise? I know some games suffer, kind of from having these really fluid, complex animations that have actually gotten like in the way of gameplay. Yeah, I'm looking
They're
at you.
super fast. They're fast.
A lot of the problem with trying to compare WoW-like animations to other MMOs is that just the way that the netcode and everything is designed and programmed into the game just really influences the way that combat's going to work. So in a game like World of Warcraft, what you really have is just several layers of abstraction. Like, you're controlling your character, you control like where it is and things like that, but between things like, okay, so you push the button, and the reason why you see that, first of all, the animations are incredibly quick, like Mark was just saying, so that you get that immediate feedback. But the thing is that the animations, they don't really care about them clipping into one another in WoW. They don't really mind about other things. You see the damage numbers come up, and that's really your feedback. The sound effects and the damage numbers are your main feedback in something like World of Warcraft. Whereas, other MMOs, they sort of tried to focus on having the visual be a little bit more of a feedback. So like in something like Guild Wars 2, the reason why you can avoid damage in Guild Wars 2 is because it's literally like, is that arm going to hit you from that mob, and if it doesn't, then you're not supposed to actually take damage. Whereas in WoW, like, short of something like kiting where you have a slowing effect on the enemy, you can't really avoid the damage because there's like sort of this large area, and they'll swing and it won't actually look like the enemy actually hit you, but you'll still take damage. And so that's something that actually sort of concerns me a little bit about WildStar, just because in WildStar, I feel like if they have a mixture of that, where they have these attacks that sort of still just fire off, and they have the telegraph attacks, you're going to get used to sort of like, oh, I can dodge all of the damage, but then if they still have some of that white damage, some of that stuff that isn't as avoidable, then I think it'll cause a little bit of a disconnect. Does that make sense?
No, it's interesting. No, it totally makes sense. And leading off of that, I don't remember, Farhan, have you had hands-on?
I've had a lot of. I went to one of the to the San Diego Comic-Con, and I got to see other people playing, but I didn't have time to actually get.
So what did all of you guys find? So we've all seen it up front and close and personal, then, at least to some extent. What have you guys? Something we talked about in the past was the UI, right? And I think this like kind of dovetails with the combat. What did you do? Like, what were you guys paying attention to while you were playing? Like, because I've kind of been a little critical of the UI, and I think it's very heavy. There's a lot of it, and there's a lot of things around your entire perimeter of your screen, which I like the way a lot of games are trying to get away from that and trying to go much more minimalist, and I don't see that. Did you guys find yourself mostly looking at a lot of the things like the telegraphs and the UI and those sort of things? But were you not paying attention so much to the combat?
I didn't find. I found myself paying a lot of attention to the telegraphs, not the UI. The UI really is it's kind of heavy and blocky a little in its design, purely due to the sort of industrial style of WildStar. WildStar is this sort of like playful but industrial sort of mix, and so that's why the UI is designed the way it is. So, but I wasn't really paying it. I didn't pay much attention to the UI at all while I was in combat. You do between it because there's so much to do basically around you. But while I was in combat, I really did pay attention. What I did pay attention to was the telegraphy, and I have to say that after a while, that the mob itself kind of faded into the background compared to where I was looking in front of it for where the telegraph would be. So that is the one thing that at times, especially for your kind of standard mobs, your creatures are out there, not the big sort of impressive stuff. You're kind of looking at, okay, where are the telegraphs rather than what the mob's actually doing itself.
Does that bother anybody else? Does that bother anybody in the panel? Like, any of you guys think that that's sort of like taking away a little bit from actually like paying attention so much to the game? You're watching like, red lines.
I find it to be an interesting question because the whole entire thing they're trying to do is trying to minimize the amount of options you have. So you have maybe 7 or 8 options across the bottom of the bar, which looks just like Guild Wars 2 or even Elder Scrolls for those who've played it at some of the conventions. But it is blocky. It does take up a large amount of space at the bottom of the screen, and then you can click a button on the far left to even pop up 12 more or 8 more slots underneath of that, so that I think you'd have like a total of 12 or 24, whatever the total number is. But to the point about the whole telegraph, 2 things. One, it did take some getting used to because you have your telegraph that you get to see, and then you use that pretty much as like your aiming arm versus just the tab targeting. And so anything within that box, anything within your telegraph is getting hit. So at first I found it distracting, and then after a while I ended up using that as my litmus test on, okay, I can hit that guy, I can hit that guy. I don't have to worry about trying to figure out range anymore. The problem that you get yourself into, at least as a noob, the couple times I played, is when you have a mob that basically aggroes you and is now at like melee range. If you're like a range fighter, of course you're sitting there shooting a point blank. When you shoot that person that's point blank, your telegraph is still 5, 6, 10 feet behind that mob. So if any other mob that's pathing or you're strafing and you hit and another mob gets into the telegraph, guess what? Now you got 2, 3 plus
you got some heat on you.
Yeah. So I mean,
I like that about it. I have to say, I like that you've got to pay attention to what's around you, because it's in MMOs I find a lot of the time now. You could go out, and it used to be an art. Pulling used to be an art. You used to actually have to know how to figure out, your positioning for mobs, watch for the pathing, and so on, and then pull at the right time. You just don't have that in MMOs anymore. At least in WildStar, you have got to pay some attention to what's going on around you, the environment, because it's so easy, especially if you've got a wide cone attack. Those wide cone attacks could get you in serious trouble, like quick, and you can get your ass kicked fast in WildStar, even at lower levels. Not just with you could come across single mobs that are going to cause you a bit of trouble. If you get 2 or 3 of them on you, you're toast. So I like the fact that you've got to pay attention to your surroundings and what's going on. So it does force you to look beyond just the telegraph, because if not, you're going to get spammed easily and quickly.
Yeah. So going back to the Redditor, questioning the fluidity of combat, I have to say it felt really tight. The time I got to play it at E3, like you said, it's not your keyboard, it's not your mouse, it's in an environment that's got like a gajillion sensory overload happening to you on a showroom floor. But I gotta say, I walked away from it saying like, wow, it felt really tight. It felt pretty solid. Like, of course, it's gonna keep getting more and more dialed in. None of the animations felt like they were just like way over the top. A lot of them felt really like perfect, and they seem to fire off really fast. So I did get a sense, like you said, with that positioning. I kind of like that you had, it was tab targeting, but at the same time you had to sort of like have your position correctly. It felt like you were like, had to do a bit of a dance with your character around on screen, which was kind of nice with the mobs and the environment as well. So I kind of really liked that aspect to it.
Yeah. One of the first quests I did was the one where you have to sacrifice a creature. Spoilers. And you have to fight these spirits. One at a time, and the fact that the spirits had all got it was a smart early quest, because the fact that the spirits have all got different styles of attack, different telegraphs, and different kind of movement themes to them, meant that you had to adapt what you were doing to what they were doing, and it was really quick, and it was really responsive. So one of the worries that you have with any MMO in what we do You go to a beta, and one of the first things you usually find is, well, they've got to tune in the combat a little bit. It's still feeling like you're whiffing through the air a bit when you're fighting, and that's common in betas. I didn't feel that at all with this. I really didn't feel that at all, and that's really encouraging about the standard of combat you're going to have.
And I think the other thing leading off of that, talking about the abilities as well. Like, of course, I was only low level in that first like low level starting zone, but I have to say for the first few abilities that I forget what class everyone was at this point. It was like I think it was the warrior class. They felt very like acrobatic and fun. Like they felt like there was a lot of fun. I had that crazy chainsaw buzz thing where you like chainsaw people. Yeah. Which it felt so. I think they're definitely on the right track. So next up, let's take the next one. So let's talk about some cities. Redditor Zalin was curious about cities and particularly about capital cities or racial capitals. We've from what I could tell, we've seen or heard very little on this subject, haven't we?
Yep, not much at all.
Not much at all. Is there anything out there besides? I mean, we got a screenshot a while back of a city or a town. We got this. Not exactly. I'm not sure if this could actually be considered a capital city.
Looks like.
Do we know anything? It looks more like an. I guess maybe people are assuming this is some sort of a town or something smaller. Was there ever any context around this image?
Crickets.
What are you guys expecting? I mean, Jeremy Gaffney, he talked to MMORPG, I think, back in May, and they revealed Ilium. Do not confuse with Ilum.
Oh God!
I know. We got a PvP there.
Yeah, really? We're gonna stand in line.
Are we gonna have bad frame rates?
Can we turn it off?
Ilium is the
turn it off.
Yeah, the Dominion capital city. It is a little too close to Ilum for my comfort. It makes me feel a little queasy. But
Twitch.
I mean, I think that's probably all we can hope for at this point is to have faction-based capital cities, because I mean, you gotta figure they're both of the factions are new to the planet or have rediscovered it or whatever. So there's no opportunity or story backdrop to explain why Chua would have a town and Makari would have a town or something like that.
Yeah, that does make a lot of sense. And I mean, really, just thinking about something like World of Warcraft, how often did you really even use all of the different cities? Like, players tended to congregate into one main city anyway, so just from a content perspective, I don't know if it's the best use of assets to try to make all the different cities when they end up getting neglected a lot.
And the whole idea of the story of the game is that you've got two factions fighting for control and eking their way and trying to discover. So if you've got these like giant maids, like plotted cities out there, kind of undermines that whole sort of like frontier territory feel of the game, doesn't it? So it doesn't quite feel that they're up against it when they're sitting in the lap of luxury, giant cities around each other. So,
I mean, do you think it completely counts out having 4 big racial cities? I mean, it makes kind of sense. It's a new planet. The races are arriving as allies. Why set up 4 racial cities throughout the world? I mean, it kind of, I guess, doesn't make sense. But I don't know. I think a lot of people kind of like having those places, those kind of racial quest lines and things like that are kind of unique.
We might see some kind of social hub that will be the place that people kind of congregate around. I think that's certainly feasible. It's just our idea of like what a city would be in an MMO. I'm not quite sure how that thematically fits.
You think we might see more like racial districts and hubs within a capital city? You think it might be that's where they're going to go, kind of like Guild Wars 2?
That's feasible, but I think just having a place that kind of feels really set out and laid out, it would be difficult. I mean, you could see like shanty towns sort of like building up, like that sort of things thrown together, especially for the exiles. That would seem to fit more in that kind of fashion. Maybe you've got on the Dominion side, you've got a Cassian like warship sort of sit there where all the Cassians sit in luxury, and around them the Drakons are basically scratching their backsides in tents. And then on the other side, the Chewer are forming basically secretive, like, nuclear installations that are about to explode. And, you know, that sort of, having that sort of flavour, sort of cramped together around each other would fit. But these sort of like established cities, I'm not sure if that really works quite with what WildStar is as it is early in the life of everybody on Nexus.
Not want the Cassians to have a warship and the
Yeah,
Exiles to have a shantytown.
Yeah.
Nice.
Well,
I'll go with that.
that's really
That
interesting.
makes
Would they
sense.
go? Would they go? I mean, there is the possibility. I mean, if Nexus is so new and it's hostile, right? Maybe they only have like really small outposts and a small settlements down there, but maybe a large spaceship could be the capital city. Similar again to the space station in Star Wars: The Old Republic.
They do have
That
the arc
never
ships.
came.
They do have that concept of the arc ships, or these
Yeah.
these giant ships that they're immigrating on. These exiles are, and Dominion have their own Starfleet or whatever that they stole that ship from. The exiles did. So, but one thing that's coming up in chat room that there's a lot of conversation about settlers and what role they might have to play in building up these towns. And I think most of the chat room talking about like settlers building up outposts and things like that. But I think it would be interesting to see what kind of role settlers will have in even like a capital city. Like if they have to actually maintain some of the infrastructure within a capital city, I think that would be pretty interesting.
Settlers kind of the roles I say seem to play from what I've seen, that they add sort of like utility to areas that are already there. Like, you know, they'll add little things that you could use to give you buffs or whatever, like the little taxis, which is great. So like they add real utility, but from what we've seen so far, they're not going to build a city. You know what I mean? From what we've seen, if that was a possibility, is like maybe like towards the Elder game. I hate saying that. One of the things settlers could do as part of the path is help basically build up sections of a city. I'd love that. That'd be great.
Have we seen any kind of landmass or world map yet? I guess I'm wondering how much of the planet will actually be playing at launch. You know, will it just be the good old one continent per expansion development? Do we have any idea?
I mean, the only maps I've seen were in like the press kit, which I think a lot of people have posted. But I think that's only one of the continents. I'm sorry.
Just looking at like the WildStar page, like they have like a page for regions, and like almost everything is just says coming soon. But it looks like Dominion have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 zones for the Dominion, 7 for the Exiles, and then 9 contested zones. So that's a lot of different zones. At least I don't know about how they fall on continents or anything like that. But
And as far as landmass goes, it's going to be really interesting. I'm interested to see how big the world is actually going to be. All right, I want to talk about 40-man raids, but first I want to talk to you guys about Shutterstock. If you guys have not checked out Shutterstock, got an awesome deal for you for Shutterstock.com. Got to go over to Shutterstock.com and use the offer code Gamebreaker8 and going to save yourself 30% off on the Shutterstock. What is this? This Shafted, my card is not working, so it's not a JPEG. Do you guys? We have a World of Warcraft show. I want to show this off to you guys. I know it's a World of Warcraft show. This is not a World of Warcraft show, but this all makes sense. Don't worry, this will make complete sense when I show it to you.
Makes sense? What?
Well,
It's
it does because
contextual.
people wonder what Shutterstock, what you guys do with Shutterstock, and I talk about how much we use it constantly, and I'm going to show you an example here of exactly how we use it. This is a show that Mike Shaftnet does on World of Warcraft. Just watch the beginning of it though, and then it'll all make sense.
Smile like a donut.
Let me give you some. Wait. I'm ruining it. Let me get some audio here for
He's
you.
very animated there. I'm quite worried about.
On this week's episode of Waypoint, Vivendi splits from Blizzard, Battlecoin currency, PTR testing, and multiple LFR queues.
Holy cow.
Man, that guy. What's up?
All right, so that's the kind of thing Waypoint does. If you guys, so he wanted to do this gag, and if you watched episode 1, the whole gag makes sense. So if you like World of Warcraft, go watch episode 1, and then episode 2 will make complete sense. But the special effects there, right? The blood splatter, the gun effect, we use Shutterstock for that. So we went right over to Shutterstock here. I'm going to show you guys really quick. Went over, and they have stock footage, not as well. I talk about footage all the time, but I don't really show it off enough. Not just stock photography and images, but we went over to footage here, and you could search for, and we searched blood splatter right there. And then you can see, so they have some that are just alpha mats, means they're black and white, and then you could just colorize it, but you can see like this kind of stuff. That's what this stuff is for. So these are in black and white because basically you colorize it, put it on the back, and you have a mat, and you have an alpha mat, and you could lay it over anything pretty much. But there's a bunch of these, all kinds of different stuff, drips, splatters, just all this kind of stuff is footage. And that's something, it's actually really easy to do. It's actually not that difficult to put stuff like that, like little special effects like that together. You just need the right stock footage with alpha channels and stuff like that, and then composite it in. So Shaft did that pretty much completely by himself on a green screen, just, fakes the gunshot, fakes the blood splatter, and all that good stuff. So check out Shutterstock.com. We want to save you guys 30% off of your account. All you got to do is go to Shutterstock.com and use the offer code Gamebreaker8. Gamebreaker 8. I don't have a card that says Gamebreaker 8, so I'm just stalling. I have one that says 7. I'll bring this one up that says 7. Oh, that's not even that.
Imagine the 8.
Imagine an 8 instead of a 7. And that's what you use.
On your monitor right now, get a red Sharpie and draw from the top of the 7 on the left to the bottom on the right.
I wish I could make that happen. We're technically.
No, I'm asking the viewers to do that so that.
Yeah, just do it in your mind. Use the 8.
Yeah.
Actually, if you really use the 7,
if you use a real one, I will not pay for a new monitor for you.
The power of illusion.
But whatever you guys need, if you guys are building a website, video project like that on YouTube, I talk about, I showed off how we built our YouTube channels and stuff like that, utilizing some of the graphics and artwork for our logos and stuff like that. We use Shutterstock. Special effects like that, perfect example of how we utilize Shutterstock. So there's just, it's really, that's how you're going to make your videos just kind of stand out from the crowd and do things that like other people out there aren't doing. Like, got to go the easier route, man. Got to check out Shutterstock. You can go over and sign up for a free account, actually. You don't have to sign up. Sign up, make a free account, start searching stuff, and actually you can make, like, they're called light boxes, and you could start saving images and footage and stuff like that and organizing it. And then if you decide to sign up for an account and you're ready to kind of take the plunge, use offer code Gamebreaker8 and you'll save yourself 30% off. So go check it out, Shutterstock.com. All right, so let's talk about 40-man raids. 40-man raids. I really want to know, Insect 7 really wants to know if they're a good idea. And I got to say, it's kind of funny because this exact conversation kind of came up over the weekend while we were at SOE Live, because we're all gamers. We're talking EverQuest, but at the same time we're talking about WildStar. And I don't know, it's such a divided opinion. And even the Reddit, it literally, we looked at the thread and it's like half up votes, half down votes. It's like so almost right at the 50% mark of being divided, which seems to, what do you guys think? I mean, some people think this is going to be a disaster. Some people think this is the best thing they could ever do. I don't know what to think. It's like 40-man raids seems like, I know hardcore raiders are super excited and they're like, they want to harken back to those old school hardcore days. The other half, the 50% are going like, that's so old school and so hard to do. Like nobody does that anymore for a reason. I don't know how it's going to go for them. This is like, it's kind of taking a big chance.
I think it completely depends on the guild that you're with, and that's assuming that you do play, with the guild with your friends. I mean, if you come from a fairly large guild that is active, that is wanting to raid, then that's just going to be a great thing. Because with the smaller raids over time, what I've noticed, let's go back to an MMO that was sci-fi based, it came out a couple of years ago. We were running 6 different raid teams a week because we couldn't get enough people into the same raid, or then you'd have like 8 people in one raid. And then you'd have like 2 extras. So we were always having people either on the bench, not able to get in the raid, and we had to run multiple raids. I think ideally the 20-man raid will probably be the most popular, and the 40-man raids is going to really be for those really larger, bigger, more well-established guilds. I mean, I can't imagine pugging one of those, but
no.
I think that, unapologetically, they have stated that they want to try to have something for, the 5%ers or whatever. So to me, they're doubling down, because all I have ever heard ever since WoW came out, and I've never really played WoW other than for a few days here and there. People miss that. That's all I ever hear is people miss the 40-man raids. I never hear anybody go, "Oh, that sucked. Oh, I hated it. It wasn't any good." That's
the flip side of that
is people say they missed it.
The flip side of that, though, I'm just playing devil's advocate for a second. This is not my opinion. This is not the opinion of Gamebreaker. This is just
Nice.
The flip side of that is like, are they just the loud, like people on the internet and the forums that start and scream that? But it's like 98% of the player base could care less about 40-man raids. Like that's the big question. And does it completely completely go like I hate to say, but somewhat wasted because a lot of people just can't do it.
That's why they have the 20-man raid, so they're giving you both options right from the get-go. It's not like you're stuck, in the 40-man raid, and if you're not hardcore enough or you don't have a big enough guild or what have you, you're screwed. They got the 20-man raid. Most guilds can get 20 people together.
So what do the 5-mans do? Go home.
You're talking about the adventures?
Yeah.
They do other content, yeah.
They do adventures, or they do alliances with other small guilds. I mean, I have never seen, I haven't seen any servers in any of the different MMOs I've been in where if you are in a smaller boutique guild or just a small guild, where if you reach out to another guild that is small and you try to build an alliance, that you can then go raid. I've never seen that not work.
I think what you got to remember is this. No one else is doing this at the moment. Like, it's seen as it's a bygone era. And I can understand why. It's because basically Dev said we're sick of spending so much time putting hot soul into areas and not enough people are going into them, and then they try to get more people into them by making them easier, and that kind of defeating the purpose. That's true. However, if it's 1% of the entire MMO base is going to be doing them, that's still a hell of a lot of people who are going to be doing them. That's why WildStar's putting that forward, even though it's not as a percentage of players. It's not as a percentage. It's not a massive amount. It's still a large amount of people, and they're basically giving them an area, a game to go do that in that no one else is really providing, and especially not in the kind of competitive and variable way that's not really been done before. So it's not going to be the thing that makes WildStar hugely successful. It isn't. What it's going to be is a part of that. It's going to be a cog in the machine that makes it successful. Do you guys think that part of this is Carbine also trying to make sort of a bit of a grab at all the large scale progression raiders to come over? Because we already see a lot of hardcore raiders don't even consider 10-mans really raiding, right? So I could imagine a lot of those guys. I don't know. I actually want to find out now that I just thinking about this, like guys like Trekkie and stuff like that who are huge World of Warcraft raiders. Are they going to go over and start 40-man raiding because that's like so the hardcore thing? I mean, it all depends on if the raids are good. You? Well, it depends if the raids are good or not. Exactly, but that's it. If they, as with everything, execution's everything. But if they execute it right, they make the raids of a standard, the scripted raids that are of a standard that we're used to. Then you have the fact that they change as often as they do on a weekly basis, so you can't just go line dancing every week. Then you add on that you're going to have leaderboards that are going to show you exactly how you're competing against the rest of the best in the world. Then you're going to have on top of that rewards for doing them in the best ways. This is stuff that MMOs just haven't done. And they're specifically targeting their content for people who are interested in being the cutting edge. And saying to them, if you want to be the cutting edge, if you're that person, and you want a game that treats you like, you've put the hours of the effort in that you have and reward you for that, WildStar's your game. Why wouldn't you at least try it out?
Yeah. I mean, what Scott's basically saying is that, even if it is targeting the 1%, like if it's 1% of the entire MMO playing user base, not 1% of WildStar players, but 1% of everyone is going to end up playing it, then within WildStar's community, then it could end up being a much larger percentage of them, because they're going to come to WildStar specifically to play that kind of content and to get those kind of social, it's fun playing within a large community a lot of times, just because you don't get those same interactions, those same dependencies when you have a smaller scale raid like a 10-man or something like that.
That's the thing that's most excited about. Is it's a game that's very, very prevalent on the idea that we're not making these things for people to just fall into each other and do. These are things where social grouping is
you have to work for
organizations needed. You got to work for it, and you'll get that sense of achievement when you do it, and you'll be shown that you've done it by the game itself and the website and everything else. So, it just makes sense, really.
Let's talk about a little bit, like you said. So, go ahead. Go ahead, Mark.
They're not apologizing for carving out a niche.
Yeah.
They're serving the vocal minority who want certain content, and they're giving it to them because nobody else is. So, I mean, if you've got, it's almost it's going to be a monopoly to some degree, because they're going to be the only game in town. Like, if you want 40-man raids, or you want 40-man war plots, or you want all the other stuff that they're doing that nobody else is doing,
there's no really any other place to go. They're the only game in town, pretty much. Yeah, no, it's really
exactly
like you said. I mean, you got 40 mans coming. If that's too big to organize, which it is, they are going to have 20 mans. I want to talk about the circle system a little bit, because I don't know if a lot of people know about this. So they're going to have a system called circles, which sounds very much like Google Plus. But so you've got your guild, but then you've got circles that you can belong to. So I guess if you have a smaller guild and say you're 10 raiders, you could join a circle with similar size guild and go work together with them. Do we know any more about how that's going to work? Is that something that I need to socially find another guild that's around, 10 people and form what we used to be called just an alliance, now is being called a circle? Or is this some sort of like, not raid finder, but guild circle finder, so we can create like a longer lasting sort of bond between us and like actually play, instead of a pug, we can sort of raid maybe, day after day, week after week, that kind of thing?
So I could be wrong on this, but from what I understand from the interviews with their social systems team, it seems like the circles system is more of like just a way for players to organize themselves and have like these kinds of chat rooms where they can basically, find other players and talk to them. And so I guess what you could have happen, theoretically, is that you could have these 10-man guilds or guilds of appropriate sizes trying to come together within the circles and sort of be like, okay, like just to find each other. But I feel like that's highly dependent on the way the lockout system works, right? If they have a lockout system, I don't know any details about that at all. But because if you are just trying to have a bunch of medium-sized guilds come together to do a large raid guild content, then if the lockout system is going to be harmful to that. So like if you can't get the same group from day to day or week to week, then that could be harmful.
And that's quite difficult. That's gonna cause a lot of confusion. Sort of, even if you're in a circle, there's still gonna be a lot of disconnect, I imagine, between you and those other circles. So
I think that's probably going to be relative to how active the circles, which is basically a mini community, are. So, for example, if you have some people who are fairly monitoring it, it's going to be almost like general chat, looking for group or whatever. People will organize as much as they need to relative to their demand or their desire, right? So, they might, within a circle, you could create a circle that's, for Lockout Tuesday or, for Lockout Wednesday, and you could create one per instance per raid type per day. There's no, to my knowledge, no limit to the amount of circles you could be in. So you just, okay, it's Tuesday, let's see what's available today and see how many people we can get. I mean, that's kind of the benefit, because it sounds bad, but it's a great thing. They've passed the buck onto that problem to the users, but they've given them a tool that they can rally behind and they can organize through. So if you're organized and you're competent and you're diligent, you individually or your group or your guild could, manage a crafting circle to sell stuff. You could manage a adventuring, let's level circle, level 1 through 5, and then, as you get from 5 to 6, you join another circle. I mean, the possibilities are endless, so the fact that you could take it to a raid, here goes a 40-man pug circle, you don't have a guild, join the circle and see what happens on every Tuesday. We try to get as many pugs together and go do the 40-man and get kicked in the teeth or whatever, right? I just see all the possibilities.
No. If they build out that tool properly, there could be a lot of possibilities, especially if it works similar to like what you're saying, like Google Circles almost. I mean, I'm sure everything we're talking about, I'm sure hardcore raiders are definitely liking what they're hearing about WildStar. And like you said, I mean, I think it's not like WildStar hates casuals. But what do you guys think? Do you think that they're looking at the flex raid system from WoW at all?
I don't think so at the moment, purely because they've been so. I mean, I like the idea of the flex rating thing. I think that is a cool idea, especially for WoW and the direction it's gone. But when the team spent so much time saying, "Yeah, raiding is going to kick you in the teeth," and we're not going to apologize about that. So you're going to come in. It's going to be tough, and isn't that great? And if you don't like that, well, we've got other things for you to do. So I think they've been pretty clear about the direction they want to go, and I think flex rating doesn't really fit with that message so far.
And I think, I mean, the other thing that kind of people always kind of say, like, they say they can't raid because they can't get the best gear, but it's like people who like, why do people really need raid gear if you don't do raid level content? It's like, if there's awesome 5-man level content for to be had, I mean, that should sort of be enough for that player base. It's just always people just want.
TB used to use the word the entitled, and maybe go on a bit too much at times. But he's right in one way, is that when you have people getting really pissed because they don't get the gear that someone else worked their ass off for 6 months to get, and they got it, and they're like, I can't get that gear because I don't raid. That's not fair. No, that's fair.
No, that's totally fair.
I mean, the reason, just to play devil's advocate again, is that, players want a sense of progression. So if they're not actually into raid content, they still want to be able to feel like they are growing. Especially if you have a game that is, built around vertical progression, where
I agree with that.
More and more powerful. And I think that, at the very least, Carbine is looking at it very closely, because I remember that on WildStar Central, like several months back, their econ designers were actively engaging the community, asking them for ideas, like how can we make solo players or small group players have progression that is separate from raid players, so that raid players don't feel like they have to do all the solo content as well in order to play their game, but let the solo players still have their own progression. So they're definitely looking at it. They're engaging the community.
Well, isn't the answer just make awesome 5-man type content, make gear.
That's the issue. That's the issue I always had with like WoW, was that there was PvP progression, and then there was PvE progression, but that just meant raiding. That was raiding, because all the 5-man stuff was work towards enough to be able to then go raid. So it never felt like there was for a solo player, or for a group especially, there was never challenging content that felt like you had a real line of progression when you hit max level. And that, frankly, I never understood that. It's like you need to have something that both, for all different types of people who like to play, to have something to work towards. You can't get to max level and say, okay, everybody's now got to max level, but only you get to really do anything anymore, and the rest of you can sit and twiddle your thumbs and do dailies all day. So that I never understood, but that's kind of changing, and especially WildStar, they're very, very aware of that. One of the things I said is that, you talk about casuals, like solo players aren't catered for it very well at all in MMOs. And WildStar, they are trying to do that for solos, for groups, and for raids.
So, if you actually look at the WildStar Center, and I definitely encourage anyone who isn't active or looking at them to go over there, because the developers are there, they are engaging, and it's a good community on the other hand as well. But what the discussion was about was that the econ designer, and I'm sorry, I don't remember which one it was that was posting in that thread. I believe it was Gortok Primus, but I could be wrong about that. Anyway, what his concern was that he didn't want to make it so that, if they add solo game content or progression for them, that the raiders feel like, okay, that's another thing that they have to do now on top of everything else, in terms of, because they already have, an idea, okay, these are all the things that we want our raiders to do. And so they didn't want to add, even more on that. And he was a little bit flexible on that. He was like, maybe it's not that big a deal if the raiders do have to do that as well. But, that was one of the things. The other thing was that, are the stats that are useful to a raider as the same kind of progression that you would want for solo game content? Because, if you're a solo, or even if you're a DPS role or a DPS class or whatever, you're still going to need to be able to take some hits. You're still going to need to be able to do that. So you're going to one of the ideas that they had was to have progression where you're adding in more survivability into your stats as opposed to just having more and more DPS where the raiders. So you can sort of have two different progression routes where maybe in terms of item level they're similar, but for the solo player progression you have more survivability stats or more special effects or something that are more helpful in non-group content, whereas for the raiders they have their own. So people are still satisfied that, okay, at least I'm progressing.
So
I'm watching
here's some-
chat. I'm watching chat while you're talking, and something I see. I've fought with this for a long time myself. Is that we start talking about solo content and progression in an MMO, and it's called a massively multiplayer online role playing game for a reason. And at some way, back years and years ago, that actually was sort of true. I think to some extent, but
Yes.
a lot of players they're questioning why are they even focusing on sort of single player content in an MMO? Like, aren't you playing the wrong genre? Why not go play a single player game? I personally, I think it's one of those things that it just happened, right? Like, developers didn't really I don't think they're the ones who created this. I think it just sort of naturally happened. And the more that they got analytics and tools to kind of watch what you're all doing, they just went, wow,
It was
a lot more
demand.
people are playing by themselves than we ever probably thought they were. Like, that's
It
just
was absolutely demand was why they made it, because players wanted solo content. That's why it's there. And so if that demand's there, it's necessary to have a route through the game there is something that solo players want to do, unless you want to be an incredibly niche game. Then you can do that. But if you
they were saying that 70%
levels of niche.
They were saying that 70% of MMO players play alone. However, I would argue that if you looked at the metrics and you looked further into the analytics, that's normally as they progress to endgame. So, I mean, at endgame, well, what is there really to do if you can't get any more levels? You have PvP or you have, raids, which is PvE. So, there should be something to be said for that. Yeah, you need to have stuff to do as a solo player or as a single player as you progress, so that you can get to end level. But once you're at end level, then that's when the whole group dynamic, the group think starts. And so there has to be a mechanism to reward the folks that are working together, that are trying to bring things together.
I wouldn't agree with that, and the reason I wouldn't agree with that is that yes, you're right, but if you play a game, it shouldn't change when you get to a certain point of it completely. So I think that absolutely you should reward grouping together, and you should do that throughout the game. So there should be elements in the game all the way through where if you're in a group, it rewards you for being in a group and doing that social thing. And then when you get to the end, it continues doing that, and it even ramps up more dramatically. But I think it's for the solo player that there should be something at the end for them to do as well. Because what you do, if you are into solo play, you get to the end and it says, don't play my game anymore. Because if you're into this play rather than the other kind of play, we're not here for you now. And that just doesn't make any sense.
Why would you need raid level gear if you're a solo player?
I'm not saying you should. I'm not saying that you should need gear. I'm just saying there should be content for you to do to progress. That doesn't have to be raid gear.
I agree with that.
If you have content, then again, it's a game that's designed around having vertical progression. That's what something like WoW was. That's something that what WildStar looks like it's going to be. It's about building your character up in strength. So they want some sort of progression. It's maybe it doesn't have to be raid level gear, but again, like if you just try to have different scales, so like raids go at this rate, and then you have like a shallower curve for solo players, then they look at that and they just feel like, oh, it doesn't feel like as good of a progression. So that's why they're looking at, okay, maybe they can have it scale up in a different way, so maybe more survivability stats, more other things, so something to engage them, make them feel like they're still progressing, but not have it like sort of impede. Because see, that's the other thing, is that even if they did add it in and they have some sort of progression for solo players, then the raiders sort of feel like, well, then what was the point of me doing all my work, kind of thing. So it's a really fine line to walk.
Can you build that graph for next week in so that we can see that the shallower curve?
I think we've had, when we've got to max level, we've had instance contents for large groups, instance contents for small groups, and in barely any MMOs is there instance content for solo players. And I don't know why.
Well, so EverQuest, 10 plus years ago, was unapologetic about, if you want to make level 5, your ass better be in a group, son. You know, I'm like,
Yeah.
what is wrong with that? What is wrong with them just drawing a line in the sand and say, hey, if you want to, progress to this level,
well, like I said, I think
Sure,
because they finally looked at analytics and said, well, most of our player base wants to play like this. I'm not defending it. I get it for you. And I know for a lot of players, they feel like it's like it waters down the game. It makes them focus on a part of the game that like maybe they should be focusing on. Like if you want to go play a single player game, there's developers making those games. And like I said, I don't necessarily think that this is something that like, I don't think you should point the finger and say bad developers. Like you guys should just draw the line in the sand. I think they looked at data and just said, look, this is what they're doing. So is it wrong for us to kind of build what they sort of they're naturally doing and playing? I think that they're just kind of doing it.
I think it's absolutely somebody mentioned Brawlers Guild that's now in WoW, and yes, that's finally come in. It only took a while, and that's one small thing you can do. I'm talking about that if you want to go out and do an adventure on your own, there's an instance thing that's going to be as exciting as maybe doing a dungeon rather than going, hey, I'm going to go and do a daily again. If you're a solo player. What I'm saying is this, is it's fine. Like EQ, love the game. It was a pain in the backside to do anything solo from day one until max level. So it was the same game all the way through.
But that's what built the community.
Exactly. And I loved it.
But at least it's consistent.
I love that. Wait a sec. I love that. And it's a great thing about the game. But what you can't do is allow people to solo all the way through from 1 to max and then say, no, you can't do that anymore. That doesn't make any sense. So if you're going to do that, have a section of content for people who want to solo at max level to progress. And, of course, all the way through, you need small groups and large group stuff that's there for people all the way through and to progress at the end game. So you've got different content streams with different ideas of what end game is. You can't have different content streams, then lop end game off for one set and let the others carry on. Believe me, I love the idea of having games that make you group, that make grouping important. But WildStar isn't that all the way through. So you can't have it not make you do that until the end and then say, okay, sod all of you, you can all go away now, we're just going to have these people. You need to keep that going because people just want it.
All right, I want to move on and talk a little bit about names in WildStar. First, I want to tell you guys about Audible. Audible. Want to hook you guys up with a free 30-day trial and a free audiobook. And I am still deep in the Ready Player One. Yes, here's a little sample for you. It's such a good book.
In fact, have started to go a little insane. I watched every episode of The Greatest American Hero, Airwolf, The A-Team, Knight Rider, Misfits of Science, and The Muppet Show. What about The Simpsons, you ask? I knew more about Springfield than I knew about my own city. Star Trek? Oh, I did my homework. TOS, TNG, DS9, even Voyager and Enterprise. I watched them all in chronological order. The movies, too. Phasers Locked on Target.
Check it out. That is Will Wheaton narrating, written by Ernest Cline. Contemporary sci-fi novel, already saying it's going to be a classic. I really, really, really recommend this one to gamers out there everywhere. You guys, MMO players especially, absolutely go listen to this book. It's called Ready Player One by Ernest Cline. You could be downloading it today for free. All you got to do is go over to audible.com/Gamebreaker. Make sure you use the /Gamebreaker URL. Sign up, make an account. You download the app, put it on your iOS device, your iPhone, your iPad, whatever you got, or your Android device. A few others there as well. And going to give you guys a 30-day free trial and a free audiobook. I definitely recommend Ready Player One. Check it out today, audible.com/Gamebreaker. All right, so next up from Redditor Swooped, opinions on numbers being allowed in names. This is, again, another pretty divided topic. I mean, we all know this is happening in WildStar. They're allowing you to put numbers into your name. It's pretty unusual, I think, across the genre. It's usually kind of shunned upon, but I think we all, when they put the robotic race in, we all kind of said, like, okay, this kind of makes sense with the robotic race, I think. There's definitely some downsides, I think, to this, though. You know, lead speak names kind of lame, all that kind of stuff. But I don't know. Where do you guys sit with this with the robotic race? You guys okay? Are you okay? And here's actually a thought I had: is what if they just if
Restricted.
what if they were to just limit it only to letting you have numbers for that one race and that was it?
And there's a suffix, perhaps.
Maybe. I would kind of like that. I'd actually like to see that happen. Do you guys think would you like to just see numbers on any race, any character all over the place?
I think it makes sense to try to restrict it just to the Macari, just because, trying to keep things consistent, trying to make it so that it's a little bit, I don't want to see an RN with numbers like 420. No.
Makes them special.
It almost would add to the world a little bit, kind of. Like, it would add to that race being like its own unique thing. I don't know. Have they said anything official on this as far as whether they would limit it to the Macari, or is it pretty much just sounding like it's going to be open?
I don't think they've defined it, but I mean, I'm not for any restrictions on names, period. I mean, if you play a bunch of different games, not necessarily just MMOs, but you play like, Battlefield or stuff like that, people got all kinds of crazy names. So I'm not really sure why people care what other people want to be called, Like,
I guess
why should you care that I'm Johnny 5 or I'm Leet? Like, how fast is that name going to get swapped up?
No,
right?
I know. And this is where it's so divided, because there's a group of players who absolutely do not care. And then there's another group of players who, like, I think kind of fall in between, where they don't really consider themselves like role players, but they sort of like this immersion of a virtual world. And for them, it like, kind of breaks the story a little bit. And then you've got hardcore RPers who are just like, no way, shape or form. L3G0, L4S, you are not allowed to join our guild. That's just it, not happening. I don't know. I think I fall a little bit in the middle. I don't know. I get nothing out of seeing.
I'm kind of there. I find usually it's a good indicator that if you got a name like that, like if you got a name that's just really lame, it just makes it easy for me to know not to bother grouping with you, basically. So, thank you for that neon sign you've got flashing off.
But I can understand Mark's take on this, though. Just being like, but why do you care?
I
like,
understand it completely. I don't care if you want to go out and do whatever you want with that. I'm really not bothered. But if it's just something that's like, you're going out there and I'm going to put something that's obviously trying to be offensive. It's like, okay, I know that's the person you are, and you're probably not somebody I want to group with, so what bother? So, but when it comes to people making the names, I don't care. Do what you want.
What do you think the probability is that they do limit this only to the Macari?
I mean, I hadn't thought about it in those terms, but it would make sense, right? It would just kind of make sense, and it would make people who play that race feel special. Hey, I'm Johnny 5 or I'm Leet or whatever.
That's what I mean. I kind of agree. Like, it makes sense for that race, and it kind of would even add to the game instead of take away from the game at that point, just because of it. Well, again, another one. People are way divided on it. Last up this week is a little tidbit. Carbine will be at PAX Prime, and they are live streaming a panel on August 31st. So mark your calendar on that. We don't have much info on what they're going to actually be revealing, but the good news, especially for everyone not going to PAX, is that you'll actually get to see it. All right, is everybody pretty confident that they're going to reveal the final 2 classes at PAX? Do you think both of them are going to show up?
Definitely. The only thing I got at E3 relative to anything is I was like, well, how come there's no panel? How come there's no reveal? I mean, they did do like an offsite, but that was more of a precedent for South Korea. And they basically said, and I forgot exactly who said it, was, we like to have all of our, reveals at consumer events, not industry events. So that's really all there's left, unless there's a whole bunch more, and this game's coming out a lot, farther away than we think. That would be the time to do it. And the hype, that follows the hype curve, right? The hype cycle. So it's going to be their best opportunity to knock it out the ballpark again.
There's going to be a new zone playable at Gamescom, so that'll be the story that can message out to Gamescom and then go to PAX and release it to new classes. I would imagine that's the way they're going to do it.
Anybody's fingers crossed? Are you guys holding your breath for a release date at PAX?
I hope so.
I'll give it up. When it
You've
happens,
given up.
it
You're just
happens, I'll just give it up.
It's really hard to
tell me what
gauge.
it is.
It's really hard to gauge with WildStar. I can't really gauge when they're going to like where they're at. I can't really tell.
So was it Mr. Frost? You know, is still saying in all the interviews that they're coming out 2013, but Jeremy Gaffney has stepped away from that and is saying it'll be released the first day it's ready. So I'm not saying that there's dissent within the ranks, but I'm just trying to say that to me that means that it's not going to be 2013. If I can read the tea leaves, you know, who knows?
I mean, it'd be
Who knows?
amazing if it's 2013 and we're in August and there wasn't any like even window confirmation like
Well,
this month.
here's another reason why it probably can't be this year is it's August, right? And they don't even have open beta. I mean,
Yeah.
if you don't have like open beta or the announcement of open beta, like maybe they'll announce that. I can't see it being released this year because you're going to need at least 3 to 6 months of open beta to get anywhere. Normally, open betas are kind of small, but if they're being as serious about doing everything according to the metrics and analytics, like they say, they're going to have to iterate in an open beta format to get really large numbers in, not the stress test they're doing in closed beta, because an open beta is going to really stress test you, but it's going to also have the people, it's going to have your hackers, it's going to have, which that's going to have to be a test, right, relative to their subscription model, which that's a whole other topic. Then it's going to, you know, really stress out all the things that they didn't see, that the limited number of closed beta folks haven't seen. And then they got to go back, recode it, tighten it up, polish it, finish, you know, upgrading all the UI things, and then start the final hype cycle to launch. They got to get their marketing, they got to get their supply chain management set up. So at this point, like, I can't see how it could get released in 2013.
Well, I mean, like, to be fair, like, I think that what they have said is that and I'm sorry, I don't remember exactly where I read it, but I think their idea of an open beta isn't like a full open beta, like everyone can get in who wants to get in. More of like a drop the NDA off of the beta and then just invite a lot more people. And they are ramping up the stress test. Like, I think that just recently they added another 30,000 people, or they added, so they are definitely ramping up in some respects in terms of their testing. So, I mean, yeah, I also don't really think that it's happening this year, but I'm still hoping, maybe.
Everybody's still hoping. All right, finally this week, I want to touch on something you brought up really quick, Mark. Adventures. That popped up last week, right? Was that like it was sort of some new mysterious element to WildStar that we hadn't really heard much about? Scott, you guys did some digging, and it turns out we actually do know a little bit about what's going on there.
Yeah, Corey Jenkins. Corey Jenkins, who's one of the marvelous people over at Zam. Sorry, Corey. I couldn't resist. He had a look into it, and Mike Donatelli at PAX East this year says that basically what adventures will be, they're not like dungeons per se, but they are things that you can queue up with in a group, a small group. Like, and then you go out, and these are things that are going to like really test you, really challenge you. That could take up to like 2 hours to do. So when we're talking like, they're talking about that small group end game, Elder game.
Stop saying it.
I can't say it. For you to do. So if you're in a small group and you want to do something that's really tough and challenging, and it's basically what would test you like a raid would for a larger group, you'll have things like this. So the example given was like the idea of you escorting this supply car across a zone, like basically an entire zone's worth of enemies, and having to fend him off, and you have to make choices on like who to save and who not to let go, and all this, and you have to be really strategic. So it says like really involved, really challenging and testing, and so real kind of end game content for small groups. So that's differentiating and having that sort of things for people to do depending on what their kind of play style is.
Solo content. There you go. Boom. So it's brand new stuff. Looking forward to more info on that. So that's it for the show, but we got a little bit more of an announcement. Sad moment. Sad moment. Mr. Scott Hawks. This will be his last show of Unicorn Duck Shadow Puppet. He will be moving on to. Who
said that? Did you decide that, Justin?
I just decided just now. Just fired. You're fired.
You bugger.
So I don't know what can you say? What can't you say?
There's a lot I can't say. I don't know. I'm not going to do my full sort of send off until Tweebo on Friday. But yeah, it's my last UDSP, which is sad. I've really enjoyed it. It's been fun getting into the whole WildStar community, and the games looks lots of fun, and it's always fun to make fun of Ganon over there on a regular basis.
So yeah, it's not just UDSP. It's not just UDSP. We also do This Week in MMO together. And it's going to be this Friday. Will be your last episode of This Week in MMO.
My last Gamebreaker show.
Yes,
I've done
quite a few. Quite a few.
I have, yeah. So yeah, this week's my last week doing shows for Gamebreaker. And yes, today's my last UDSP. Farhad, it's been a pleasure, and Mark, it's been a pleasure to meet you recently. And yeah, it's been great. So I'll do my full goodbye on Tweeb on Friday, but yes, my last UDSP.
And then
thank you, everybody.
And then I obviously I am going to get hammered week after week after week. Is where did Scott go? What happened to Scott?
I'm not going anywhere.
Eventually, something. If there's any other information I can give you, I will. If something is revealed, something.
Maybe.
Probably not Friday. Definitely not Friday. Maybe never. Maybe never.
Maybe never.
Maybe never. Well, it's been a pleasure. Last UDSP. I get to still talk to you on Friday, so see you on Friday. But that's it. So for Scott Hawks, you can follow him on Twitter at Jarimor. That is JARIMOR. And of course, while he's still...
I am still at Zam.com.
Yes, he is still at Zam.com. Yes. And he's still the editor-in-chief of Zam.com. You can still follow him at Jarimor, JARIMOR, on the Twitter. See you on Friday, my brother.
Okay,
Farhan Siddiqui, follow him on Twitter at Unindel, UNINDEL. And of course, right here on UDSP every week. He's not going anywhere. He'll be back next week for another Unicorn Duck Shadow Puppet. And Mr. Mark Taylor, you can follow him on Twitter at Guild Umbra, Guild UMBRA. And maybe we'll see you next week, sir. Yes, sure. Back for another one.
All right.
Yes, he'll be back. He's coming back. You'll see more Mark. He's coming back. You can follow me at Gary Gannon, follow Gamebreaker TV, Gamebreaker TV. And I don't know, we got a lot going on. That's all I got. I don't know, a lot going on. Too much going on.
It's a blur. It's a
blur.
Post-Vegas blur.
It's a post-Vegas blur of new websites and all kinds of crap. So come over to Gamebreaker.tv. We'll be announcing all kinds of new stuff. So check it out. And we do the show live every single Monday at 3 PST. Come over for the live show. And thank you guys so much for watching this week and every other week. So we'll see you again next week for some more WildStar talk. See ya.